So welcome everyone to our Career Exploration Panel. Thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, a special thanks to our panelists and moderator for dedicating their time to talk to us today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raquel and I'm the Partnerships Manager for the School of Biomedical Engineering, or SBME. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that UBC's SBME, the Center for Blood Research, and the BC Children's Hospital Research Institute are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And, it's important for us to remember that we are guests on this land where generations of those who call this place home have passed down their stories and cultures for thousands of years. So we have a lively and interactive event ahead of us that we hope you will all enjoy and learn quite a bit from. For the first 60 minutes, we'll have a moderated panel discussion where our moderator will ask questions and we'll also invite questions from you, the audience. And we'll then set up breakout rooms so that you can network directly with our panelists. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panelist, Priya Iworima. And Priya is a PhD student in the School of Biomedical Engineering with her research focusing on developing a differentiation protocol to generate stem cell-derived insulin-producing cells that may one day be used as a potential therapy for type 1 diabetes. Priya, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Raquel, for that wonderful introduction. Again, welcome everyone to this panel discussion. I am very excited to have you here. I'm very excited with the lineup that we have today. Honestly, just researching everyone and their accomplishments. If we just had to introduce that, we would spend the entire 90 minutes. So we have a really great group of people today. So first off, I'm going to start off by introducing each of the panelists that we have here in alphabetical order, just very briefly telling you about their positions and where they're at. And then I will hand it over to them to give us a little bit more detail about how they got to where they are today. So first off, we have Dr. Genge. She is the manager for recruitment at Stem Cell Technologies, which is a leading biotech company in North America and also has a global presence as well. She did her postdoc and her PhD at SFU, which for those of you that are in the lower mainland is the enemy of UBC. So we'll forgive you for that, but I also went to SFU for my undergrad and my master's, so yay. And at SFU, she studied the cardiac electrophysiology using zebrafish as a model. So thank you for joining us today. Next up, we have Dr. Johnson. She is currently finishing up her final year as a resident physician at BC Children's Hospital. She also has a master's in clinical epidemiology and got her MD from UBC. Next up, we have Dr. Newell. Dr. Newell is a lecturer at UBC in the department, the School of Biomedical Engineering. She finished her PhD also at UBC under Dr. Krypton, where she was studying the importance of inversion, posture, motion, and muscle effects on spinal alignment. She also finished her postdoctoral work at UBC as well. Next up, we have Dr. Ravi. He is an associate professor at the University of Toronto. He got his PhD from U of T as well in medical biophysics. He is also a co-founder, chief science and clinical officer for Molly Surgicals, which is a biotech company that aims to make precision surgery simpler. And finally, we have Dr. Shakiba. She is an assistant professor at the School of Biomedical Engineering here at UBC. Her lab focuses on studying cell competition using systems and synthetic biology to engineer stem cell fitness. She is also the co-founder of Advice to Scientists, which is an online hub where the scientific community can share their perspectives on topics that are central to the professional growth of scientists at all stages of the career, from the high school student up to any age you can think of that is the scientist. So I'm quite excited for the panelists that we have today, and I hope that you in the audience are also excited as well. So let's just dive right into it. I would like to start just going down the line with Dr. Genge first to discuss a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your position, and how you got there.
Well, thanks for having me today. And it's always kind of fun for me to do these panels because I am not on the lab bench anymore. And I was definitely one of those graduate students that loved research, really loved kind of getting to find out new things. And even as I look at it, yes, I did study cardiac electrophysiology or cardiac contractile muscle, but what I really did was I studied the evolution of how different protein subunits were interacting together and used zebrafish as a comparative model because they're easy to look at, but they also recapitulate the cardiac electrophysiology better than a model like mouse. The tough part is when you study something like that is there may not be an immediate job that directly comes out of that research. And I decided not to continue with an academic pathway. I wanted to learn a little bit more about science communication and particularly about how collaborations worked in industry. So when I finished my PhD, I will be honest, I did not do enough research into what I could do. I was really, really nervous about that. And I was very nervous that I was not following the more traditional path, which was to do a longer term postdoc. My postdoc, I did about a 4-month contract just to finish up with a collaborator. They wanted me to get a study initiated. So when I was done that, stem cell is the biggest kind of game in town. We do have the most employees in a Canadian-based biotech, of which we have, I think, over 900 based out of Vancouver now. And I started talking to people about what types of jobs there are there for somebody like me who did not use stem cell products, or as I'm kind of listening to people's research, didn't do something that directly applies to the type of science we support. But what we do is we hire a lot of scientists who understand the needs of people at the lab bench and who understand what scientists even need to move forward in their career. Because a lot of people, as I learned, are like me, who may not be directly using the research they did during their PhD as they move through their career. So I started at Stem Cell in sales, which was and is a great place to learn the business of science. And more importantly at Stem Cell, because I first looked at sales as being like a used car salesman, or the people that I will be quite honest with, I avoided in the lab. I was the one that was like, oh, there's a salesperson coming, time for a coffee break. I don't want to talk to that one again. Or that had the experience of trying to talk to a sales rep and realizing they had absolutely no idea what the tools they had did. We don't do that at Stem Cell. We put scientists first into those roles who can understand the needs of the customers, aka fellow scientists, who, go through the grief of having all your cells die. That was great. It was a great learning experience because Stem Cell taught me all about not only the products, but how to better support scientists. But I knew it wasn't the long-term fit for me. I wanted to get into something where I got to talk a little bit more of the science with people, but also started to realize that my passion was to help people like myself who didn't know what to do with their degree, who didn't see a direct path, and maybe were looking for something a bit more non-traditional. So I got really lucky that I saw the recruiter job and thought that that was really interesting because it could help people get jobs and it could help people navigate the job market. And I didn't realize at first that recruiters were in HR because most of you probably only know HR as, they fill out paperwork for you and they do something if you have a problem with your job. I had no idea what the department did until I joined it and realized that they are in a great place to help grow a company. And they saw the potential in starting to build up scientific recruiting of having a scientist to understand the needs of both the hiring managers and everybody who needs to hire a new scientist, as well as potential people coming in with great science degrees and not sure where they fit. And everybody just applies for the position that says scientist, even though we have a lot of different career paths. So that's a long way of saying how I got to where I am today is they have started letting me build up the team of more people who come in with a science background at various degrees past. I have recruiters now who have PhDs in different areas, as well as people who may have worked in the lab at Stem Cell who are recruiting for us and are always able to talk people through where you might be able to use your skills, your technical skills, as well as all those amazing professional skills that you might have built up doing extracurriculars and find a place at a company. So that's how I got to where I am.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. That was really, really enlightening. Especially I know myself and a lot of students that I've been able to mentor from the undergrad program are really struggling with what they will do with their degrees if they're not going down, say, the traditional route of just going back into academia and specifically becoming a professor that's running their lab and also taking course load. So thank you for that. I'm sure you're going to get a ton of questions from people in the audience. Next up, I wanted to switch over to Dr. Shakiba. So you are kind of on the other side a little bit. So could you tell us also a little bit about how you got to where you are, and also tell us if this was the dream job that you had when you were a little child.
Oh, that's easy. It was not the dream job. And although I took a rather linear seeming route, it was never linear in my mind. So I grew up idolizing Steve Irwin, watching naturalists, and I was determined to spend my life exploring the Amazons and cataloging species. That didn't happen. But I guess I got a bit of an offshoot of that. So now I'm looking at stem cell systems from somewhat of an ecological perspective. And in our lab, we try to understand what allows stem cells to get along and when they don't, when they bully each other, when they kill each other off. We are avid users of stem cell products. So, and it's nice to see fellow stem cell people here. But yeah, I grew up in Toronto and I really did not know that I was going to be a professor. I just followed my gut along the way. So in high school, I kind of looked around and decided, I really like biology, I really like math. And even though I kept telling my parents who are both engineers from the beginning, I said, I'm not doing engineering. I ended up doing engineering. And so I did my undergraduate degree at University of Toronto in a program that was called Engineering Science. It's still there. It kind of straddled engineering and science and allowed me to do biological or biomedical engineering, which was a new thing at the time. And it allowed me to be different from my family of engineers. Nobody was a biomedical engineer. So I just followed my gut, went into that, and started to see that engineers can play in the biological sandbox too. And I was really kind of excited to come under the mentorship of Peter Zanstra, who became my PhD supervisor. So I stayed at University of Toronto, and here was this chemical engineer who was doing basic, like foundational research into stem cells, understanding how they work. How can we kind of program them genetically and in their environment so that they behave like mini computers and we can do fun and exciting things with them. So that really opened up my eyes to what an engineer can do. And I brought down those kind of boundaries. But even in that, even to the end of my PhD, I was not convinced that I would stay in academia. I had started applying to medical school. I was applying to industry jobs. And I also applied to a postdoc in parallel. And I was always bet hedging. And then again, I just followed my gut and I decided, I really like mentoring. I like leading groups. I like the flexibility that academia provides in coming up with ideas and kind of getting people around me to, believe in those ideas too and work together to achieve them. So then I went off and did my postdoc in Boston. I joined Ron Weiss and Domitilla Del Vecchio at MIT. Again, engineers playing in a biological toolbox in the world of synthetic biology and really viewing DNA as this programmable code, like computer code that we upload into stem cells and control their behavior. So I brought those two ideas together, systems and synthetic biology that I had acquired, and now my lab is applying both of those things.
Thank you for that answer. I love that you say that engineers can now play in the sandbox with biologists, because that truly is the heart of the School of Biomedical Engineering, is seeing this spectrum of people studying so many different things, from stem cells to muscles to, you know, circuits, and all of that can be tied in. So I absolutely love that interdisciplinariness of the program and of the scientific environment as well. It's not just limited to biomedical engineering. As scientists, I really believe we are just great when we collaborate with different people from different perspectives that can, you know, make that problem even less of a problem. So that was really great. Thank you. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ravi. I feel like you intersect these two things, especially as an undergrad. I always felt like it was biotech or academia, and that was it. Nothing laid in between. You could never mix them together. So could you tell us a little bit about, you know, your journey and where you are right now?
Sure. I mean, nothing about my journey I could have predicted at any point in my career, really, to tell you the truth. I think very much like Dr. Shakiba's story, it kind of evolved over time. I knew at a very young age that I wanted to do something in the biomedical space. Wasn't interested in becoming a doctor, but I knew I wanted to do something in the biomedical space and engineering. And this is going to date me so much, but like I grew up in Africa, and the show that I loved the most was, I don't know if you guys know, but The $1 Million Man. Everything about him was enhanced with like technology and biomedical engineering. He had superpowers. And because of that, in the early stage, I was like, oh, biomedical, and being able to simplify the complex system of a human body into like these bite-sized, simple devices would be something that I could see myself getting into. So initially, I thought I'd go on and become an anaplastologist, which is somebody that's an allied health professional that makes prosthetics. And so I was thinking about that. And then life gets in the way, and I found out I really liked physics and the fundamental nature of physics, and how that interplayed. And very much like Dr. Shakiba, I did my engineering science undergrad at U of T with a biomed specialty. But then I quickly followed that on with a PhD in biomedical physics, where I focused primarily on simplifying breast cancer care and providing image guidance, developing new image guidance technologies for breast cancer surgery, radiation oncology, and therapy in general. And it sort of naturally pivoted into me becoming a clinical medical physicist. And so that's someone responsible for radiation oncology and radiation delivery and treatment. And again, these are all just natural evolutions, and it kind of grew. And my interests were always around, where can I grow as a person? What area is of interest? And like, I never looked at my career as something as a career, but it was always, you know, a passion project where you're learning new things, excited by new frontiers. And so I was a medical physicist. I got responsible, and it kind of grew and evolved in that program. And academically, I became an associate professor. But I was really proud of the clinical program that I built at Sunnybrook Hospital that delivered brachytherapy treatment and became one of the largest brachytherapy providers in Canada. And out of that research, you know, again, my interest in just challenging was, I had this side project going on that was about improving breast conserving surgery and the guidance for breast conserving surgery. And that was I received a little small fund, worked with a couple surgeons, Dr. Nicole Lekong out of U of T, and together we collaboratively came up with this idea that then became an offshoot company. And only, I think, a year ago, I decided, you know what, I'm going to now transition away from my academic and clinical profile, and I've moved full-time over to kind of run the industry profile. And I'll tell you, it's very different. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They all are equivalently rewarding. It's just a very different point. And from me personally, I found, and you can see, I kind of gravitate towards growth and challenge. And so I found, you know, while I was in my academic profession, I was kind of chugging along, and I kind of got a nice steady pace, and I was reaching all those milestones, versus this industry opportunity that came out was a completely new ballpark. And I will say, like, the ramp up and curve of learning that I've had to get involved with, like building out an HR recruiting team to get new teams and new scientists and technical staff on site, marketing, business, sales, building out a company in general has been an exponential growth curve, but has been extremely rewarding. And chasing that kind of evolution as a person and as a career is where now I'm finding myself. So, you know, this is where I am at right now, and all the rest of it is just kind of background for the future, I suppose.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's really great, especially you talking about the business of science and understanding the business of science. I've really been, you know, fascinated with that. And really, it's not restricted just to biotech, because when I think of, you know, a PI leading his lab, he is basically running a small business, or she is running a small business, you know, like you have to deal with the students, you have to hire people, you have to make sure the budget is proper and all of that. It is really just a small business. And I'm glad to see that we have representation being increased. You know, we've had issues, it's getting better, but I'm so glad to see, you know, people that look like me. I'm seeing women that are leading these wonderful groups, and men too, you know, we're not leaving you behind. But I love that we are just seeing this diversity in science picking up, and people really understanding the business of science is going to benefit the lab, be it academic or an industrial setting as well. Next up, I would like to turn the spotlight over to Dr. Newell. So could you just discuss with us, you know, your position, how you got there? And specifically, I'd like to you to talk about looking backwards. If you think that you would have taken the same sort of route to get to where you were, or, you know, it's hindsight 2020, and if you had to do it over again, you would have picked something else.
Okay, well, I'll start briefly with my background, and then I'll get to that question. I don't come from a long line of engineers. I come from a small fishing town in Nova Scotia, and I barely knew what an engineer was when I was coming out of high school. So I stumbled into engineering, and it wasn't until my 4th year I was doing mechanical engineering, and I got to my 4th year and found out about this biomedical engineering area and was just so excited about it. I enjoyed some of the things about mechanical engineering, but I wasn't really a car enthusiast or anything like that. So to be able to see how you could apply those concepts to the human body, probably one of the most complex systems there is, it was pretty exciting for me. So I did my master's in biomedical engineering, and that was in gait analysis, looking at knee osteoarthritis and how the way we walk can contribute to our development of osteoarthritis of our knee, looking at the role of gait in the success of total knee replacements and in the design of total knee replacements. Then I came out to UBC to do my PhD in injury biomechanics. And so I really focused on neck injury in regards to car accidents, like rollover car accidents, and how we injure our neck and how that could be prevented through car design and different things like that. And one of the fun things with my PhD was I got to stick a little needles in people's necks and measure indwelling electromyography of the neck muscles to see the role that played in the neck injury. And then I did my postdoc in a lab that does more surgical navigation technology. So looking at using x-rays and something called fluoroscopy to navigate in a spinal surgery. And then I went on maternity leave with my 2 children. And as I was on maternity leave, I was asked to teach a course here at UBC in the School of Biomedical Engineering. It was a biomechanics course, which is kind of my area, and just loved it. And so then I just took on more and more teaching tasks and just haven't really looked back from that, because I've really enjoyed working with the undergrad students, some really bright minds, and just the engagement and the fun that I have with teaching the undergrads is just phenomenal. I do 2 biomechanics courses with the department, with the school. I've coordinate and teach the capstone, the senior year design course, which is a lot of fun. And then we're starting a undergrad research program, like a course where students get to dabble in research as well. So that's going to be starting this year. So that will be fun. So getting to the question of whether I would take a different path, I mean, I almost feel like I'm lucky that I made it here, coming out of you know, my whole family being fishermen. I don't think I would pick a different path. I think it's been an interesting way to get here, and I love my job. I love biomechanics. It's a lot of fun. I love working with the students and teaching, and so I think I would probably end up here regardless anyway. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's a really great answer. And I love how you talk about the journey that you came from. People sometimes feel that, I don't know if the right word to use is they're limited by where they're coming from. And that is not a thing. Like, we really can be what we want to be in life. Like what our mom and our dads told us, I truly believe that happens. Now it's just about the journey and finding the right setting, the right mentors that will help facilitate that goal that you have. And I really appreciate this panel because there's such diversity in your journey that it will reach out to one of the many students that we have here. It's reaching out to me. There's so many things I'm just taking little notes on. So thank you for that. So next up, we're going to address the question to Dr. Johnson. So again, please, could you just tell us a little bit about your position, how you got here? I would also like to know about your choice of going to get your graduate degree while you have your MD as well, because, you know, you've got so much free time on your hands to do all these other things as well. So yeah, take it away, Dr. Johnson.
Perfect. So I'm Newell. I'm also originally from a small town in the middle of relatively nowhere. I'm from Fort St. John in northeastern BC. And so my kind of first foray into research and academia was actually through science fairs. So I was like the prototypical science fair nerd, going to national and international level kind of science competitions. And looking back, I kind of laugh at some of my projects, but it was good about science. And I wound up going to McGill for my undergraduate in immunology, where there I actually did more basic science kind of research for fun. So I worked in NMR, just shout out to the medical physics piece. And then I wound up doing a position at the University of Alberta in pox virus evolution, so totally different. And it was during that position where I was counting viral plaques and trying to get my cells to live that I came to the realization that I think I needed to do something more clinical, like more, I guess, people, like more communication with actual individual patients. So I wound up applying to medical school. And in retrospect, I think one of the things, you know, having been through the medical education system now in my, oh gosh, 8th year of study, is that there are so many other paths. If you are interested in doing a clinical career. So I have colleagues in, you know, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, dietetics, like you name it. So I think when I was in undergrad, I was like, oh, I can only go the PhD route or the med school route. And the reality is that is 100% not true. So needless to say, I wound up going to UBC for my medical degree. I did consider an MD PhD, but ultimately I wanted to do my research in the area that I clinically am specializing in. So I decided to hold off on that. And then at the end of my medical school career, I actually thought I was going to be an anesthesiologist. So we have to apply for postgraduate training. So unfortunately, at the end of medical school, you can't work as a doctor. You need to do a residency or do a further 2 to 7 years of training. So I had done all the applications for anesthesia and then went through the interviews and sat there going, uh-oh, these aren't my people. This is not my place. And so I took a year off and did my master's degree to be productive and also have some more opportunity to do some research, and reapplied the next year to pediatrics, which is where my passion is. And now I'm just doing my fellowship applications to be an intensivist, to work in the ICU. So my path in some regards was linear in the sense that, you know, I did undergrad, med school, but I have kind of gone back and forth in terms of what I want my career to look like, and I'm still figuring out how I'm going to spend my time between research, between clinical work. I'm relatively earlier on in my career than the other panelists, but yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm glad to hear someone else is from a rural town.
Awesome, thank you for that. Very funny that you should mention Fort St. John. So I am Nigerian, and when I first came to Canada, I landed in Vancouver. So in Nigeria, I live in a big town, a very big city, and I like big cities. So when I came to Vancouver, I'm like, okay, this is good, I can deal with this. And then the very next day, we came with an agency where all of us now went to the schools that we were supposed to be at. And my school was Grand Prairie Regional College in Grand Prairie. So I got from Vancouver to Grand Prairie. And when we were landing, I saw bales of hay and farmland, and it was not what I anticipated at all. And then I got to visit Fort St. John, which somehow is smaller than Grand Prairie. So kudos to everyone that has lived in a small town. Like, I admire how you're able to do that. I'm a person that doesn't do well in small towns if I don't have to be in small towns. So thank you so much for being the person that you are and being successful in the career field that you've chosen. So one theme that I've noticed throughout all of this is, regardless of, the quote unquote linear trajectory that some have taken and others haven't, there really isn't anything linear about that path. Right? Like, there have been probably ups and downs where you questioned what you were going to do. If you were going to do it, you had to change paths. So I wanted to kind of just shift this conversation into more of the communications and mentoring side of things from you. So you all have mentored and have been mentored by people. So how do you identify someone that you would want to be a mentor, especially thinking about the undergrads and the grad students that are in the audience, and how do they approach these mentors to ask them? Because a lot of people are very shy and feel like they don't have anything to offer the mentors that they're asking to, give their time and talk to them about career path, give advice. So how do students handle this? So I will start off with Dr. Newell. Or how did you handle this?
I think that's a good question of how do you identify a good mentor. And I think for me, the two areas that I've kind of hit on for that is somebody that is in the area that I'm interested in, so that you can kind of have an idea of where you need to be in terms of skill set and training and education. But I think it's really important to identify with a mentor that has the same sort of life goals that you do, and align with your work-life balance and what you really want out of life. Because different people have different priorities, and so it's not very useful to be given advice to go a path that you're just not interested in pursuing in terms of your work-life balance or something like that. So I think that's been very important, and I think that's hard to find a good mentor that aligns with that, but it's very valuable. And I think from a mentoring perspective, we all know about the pay it forward system. So we all had mentors that got us to where we are, and we understand that that's a very important step. And I myself am very happy to contribute to that. But also I get a lot from mentoring young, bright minds. I think it's a lot of fun. It, keeps you young a bit, and it's a really energetic, fun experience for me. So I don't mind that at all, being on the mentor side. So I think there's something to be gained from the mentor side as well. In terms of how to approach somebody to mentor you, I think just being excited about what you're doing and showing that enthusiasm just gives the energy needed to be the mentor, and knowing that somebody's really excited about what they want to do and knowing what you can help them with can get them where they want to go. I think that's the key.
Awesome, thank you for that. I'm gonna turn this question over to Dr. Ravi.
After a year, you'd think I'd be better at unmuting myself. But this is a great question, and I'm I don't think I'm very unique, but I think my perspective on mentorship is very different. I never had a single dedicated mentor. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of people who I've looked up to and have had massive influence in shaping my career. But I think, you know, looking for that advice, and that it's almost context dependent. And it depends. You can have a mentor for life balance, where you are in your career. I think I had a mentor before I had kids, after I had kids. Like, it's very, it really depends on where you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and that contextualization of mentorship is very important. Thinking that one mentor is going to answer everything for you is likely not the best approach. And having multiple viewpoints, and even sometimes different mentors will have conflicting viewpoints, but it's important in terms of making informed decision making as your career progresses. And I think I pride myself in having that exposure to as many people as possible. And I'm an introvert by nature, so going out there and putting yourself out there in terms of making and getting connected to mentors is hard. It's not something that naturally comes to a lot of us engineers who are a little bit more introverted. I think it takes a little bit of, and what you'll find is if you put yourself out there, is everybody is genuinely kind. Like the amount of kindness and capacity for kindness that humans have is amazing. And I think as long as you approach people, like Dr. Newell said, with enthusiasm, with professionalism, it's key. You don't want to like send like acronyms and LOLs in your messages, but as long as you approach everybody with a certain level of enthusiasm and professionalism, you're gonna have it paid back in spades. And I've been privileged, really. I've had some amazing students and people that I've mentored over the years. And from a mentorship perspective, and why I encourage people to mentor and coach, is it helps you articulate your values very well. Like I don't have a lot to pass on to people in terms of technical knowledge and stuff like that, but in terms of values and how to approach problems and look at things from different perspective, I think I can give something there. And it's that piece that is the real value of a mentor, and being able to present, you come to them with a problem and then ask them for their perspective, and you get an outside perspective from someone who's lived it and lived those challenges before you. And I think that's very useful. So for me, having students and to this day, even as I'm at the company, I still cherish having students and teaching them, only because it helps me articulate my messaging and my values as well.
Thank you for that. That was really great. I love the articulation of values and not having a single mentor. I think a lot of us also feel like there is the one sort of unicorn type mentor that will tell us every single thing in life, and the question of the world, the answer to the universe, we'll find that one magical person, and that's not the fact. We have multiple people with multiple perspectives, and really making that informed decision from the different perspectives is very helpful. So next up, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Gange. I can only imagine the amount of emails that you get from people, not only about jobs that are available, but also trying to get you to be a mentor. So, same thing. How could people approach being a mentor? What have you learned from your mentors and mentees? And how can students stand out, even if it's just something like an email? Because unfortunately, now we have to deal with this virtual world that we're in until things get back to whatever the new normal is going to be, and we can, interact in person. So how can we stand out virtually?
Yeah, no, and I absolutely love there isn't just one mentor for everything you need. And I actually encourage people to, sometimes you're going to have a few informational interviews, and you might think that somebody is going to be able to guide you on a path. And it might end up being that you actually learn that's not the direction you go. So sometimes when you think about, what a mentor is, they can often just help to shape you in a way that you didn't even think of. So I would encourage people, and I found this with myself, that I've ended up having so many different types of mentors. So I think there's the obvious ones who are, guiding you through learning those technical skills and learning how to think like a scientist, and really be that creative researcher that a lot of us will go through at some point in time. And then there are those people who are going to help shape you in the way you even think about what is your career. Because for many of us, myself included, I did just follow passion. And I approached people by getting excited about what my research was and also going in and being genuine. That's the biggest thing I would advise. And I think we've already heard that kind of said, that if you go in and you want to be yourself, don't pretend, because that comes across to anybody that you're interacting with. We see a lot of people who will use LinkedIn, which is an amazing tool, but you can tell when somebody's using a canned message and you're like, you have sent this out to 50 people and you're just hoping one person answers. And a lot of times, if you're hitting, like, I will be honest, I do get a lot of emails. I have a huge number of people who will be like, hi, I want to talk to you so you can tell me what I can do for my career or what job would suit me. And I look at that and it's almost overwhelming for me, because I can't tell after one conversation what job is right for you. What I can do is sometimes help to provide the tools so that you can start thinking about what may be a job that gets you excited and what those steps may be to get to your dream job. So when you're looking at approaching people, and I would say that many of us on this panel may not be your first point of contact. It may actually be better to talk to somebody who is just taking that first step and to start to gain some information so that you'll be able to have a better conversation with, being honest, a recruiter. The more information you can give us, the more advice we can start to give to guide your path. And again, to go back to the being genuine and showing what you're excited about, if you can show that you've done a little bit of research beforehand, then anybody who mentors you is going to be able to feed off of that. And they're going to be able to do a little bit more with it. So that is honestly the advice I usually give people. Don't just look at having one mentor. I would say even now, my direct boss is the chief HR officer at Stem Cell, and I have learned so much from her, even though she and I do not parallel each other in training whatsoever. And sometimes even when I'm speaking like a scientist, I'm pretty sure she's like, okay, but we're actually talking about this right now. That theory is great. You guys can go off there and talk about it. You can see the laughing, the business speak is very, very different than the science speak. But equally, I would say that there are several scientists at the company who are currently shaping my career. And I would even say the CEO of Stem Cell has been an absolutely amazing mentor to me in helping me to think about what do we need to help grow our company with people who are very passionate about moving science forward. And that seems super broad, but that's where it comes down to the values that we were talking about, is making sure that what your career path and how your future steps go and match with the values, you should see across mentors. And that's what's more important than looking to gather a mentor who's going to tell you step by step, or has the exact technical skills, or has the exact job you think you're going for. Because honestly, everything is changing so quickly that you are not going to have the same job path as anybody who mentors you. And if you are looking to have that, that can lead to a lot of disappointment. My job didn't exist when I even started at Stem Cell, and that's within the last 4 or 5 years. Things are changing, and we can honestly say that probably everyone here even knows that my supervisor, how it worked for him to get into academia is definitely not the path that most people are taking today. So a little bit of a convoluted answer, but look for a range of experiences and approach people genuinely.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. There are just so many nuggets of gold in this. I hope that this recording is available to others, because I feel like not just trainees, like anyone can get a lot from this. So, really just identifying people that you would want as a mentor, and particularly what you said about someone showing you what you don't want to do. I find sometimes people forget the value in identifying what you don't want to do and just checking that off the list so that you can ignore that and it's not noise. So I really love that. And also coming genuinely when you're talking to people so that they can actually help you go down the path that you want, as opposed to this make-believe path that you have created in your head that you don't even want, that they're giving you advice on how to accomplish that. So thank you for that answer. Next up, I will hand it over to Dr. Shakiba.
Yeah, so I think all the points that were raised so far totally resonate. I think one thing that we should all probably recognize is that scientists have probably an innate drive to mentor, because we likely have benefited from mentors. And that sort of kindness that Dr. Ravi mentioned, I think, is something that we should embrace and take advantage of. And so you should never be afraid of being like a burden, like you're asking for too much from other scientists, because that's kind of our job, right? And the future of science depends on us empowering each other to get to our potential, to fill niches, to think differently, to disrupt processes of thinking. And so that's one of the privileges of my job, and why I stayed in academia, is to be able to impact lives of future scientists who will do better than me. And, you know, we can stand on each other's shoulders. So having said that, I didn't really have a strategy or like skills to acquire mentors. I really just lucked out. It was a lot of right place, right time, people who rallied around me and decided they wanted to empower me. But now that I look in hindsight, there's definitely some tips and tricks one could apply to get the right people. Definitely one of them is diversifying, as others have mentioned over and over. You can't expect one person to be your go-to for everything. We're all very multidimensional, diverse beings. You're not going to resonate in every way with everyone, right? And so recognizing that, you know, you probably need a mentor for advice on, I don't know, life matters, and one for something else. And opinions conflict. So it's okay to get these opinions that conflict and decide what works best for you. The other one that was really, I think, important that I realized is that it tends to be, it's not an accident, I think, that good mentors breed good mentors. It's a learned skill in many ways. And so it helps to kind of look at the trajectory of mentorship of someone, a scientist perhaps that you're looking at supervising you for grad school, or, you know, in an industry position. What have their mentors gone on to do? What do they think of their mentorship experience? And to try to seek out those individuals that really get invested. Everyone's definition of mentor differs from what I now understand. To me, it's someone who is really invested in you, in your success, in getting you where you want to go, where you see value, and not imposing their, you know, agenda on you. And so I think that is really helpful, right? To appreciate what the person's view of mentorship is and how that reflects on the people they have mentored. The other sort of more tangible tip or trick, I would say, is that it can be overwhelming to approach someone by email or in person and say, hey, will you be my mentor? It's kind of like a marriage proposal. It doesn't need to start that way. And I've had a lot of good organic mentorship relationships blossom from just a simple question. Like, I will reach out to someone and say, hey, I saw you did this thing. I really would love to pick your brain about this one specific question. And all of a sudden, it's not so overwhelming for that person to think that they have to like distill and bottle up all their like wisdom. They can ask that very specific question. And I go into that coffee meeting or whatever it is with a list of things that I'm hoping to learn from them. And what I've noticed is that they come out now invested. It's like, okay, I gave you that advice for that thing you're applying to. How did it work out? And so if you want to now build on this relationship, you follow up and say like, hey, I did this thing you told me to do, or maybe I didn't, maybe I pivoted. And this is how it worked out. Thank you so much for giving me your time. And now that person may be wanting to come back and help you grow even more and more. And I get that, right? Now, sometimes I get emails from those people that I went to for one question to be like, oh, I saw this thing, it made me think of you, right? And then that mentorship relationship grows. It's not a day one proposal. So I think building on those types of organic interactions can really help.
Awesome, thank you for that. Yeah, very important point to build on those relationships that are organic. So, you know, even if you haven't identified a mentor yet, there are lots of events that, you know, are being held by organizations, either at school or outside of school, where you can network with people, whether you know them or not. And even in this format of being the virtual world, we can still try our best, you know, just to say hi and start that conversation with that person that you think might be going down the path or in the path that you want. Next up, I will turn it over to Dr. Johnson to add to this topic about mentors and mentees.
So to be honest, I don't know how much additional advice I have, because everyone's raised excellent points. I think Dr. Shakiba brought up the point about the marriage proposal, all kind of, it feels like a lot of pressure to approach somebody. I think one of the things that I've noticed with students that have approached me is I get asked a lot of questions. How do I get into medical school? Or how do I get into this program or that program? And to be honest, it's been 5 years since I've done the application. I don't know logistically how you get into medical school. Like, have the requirements change? Have, like, maybe people have changed, who you contact, etc. Right? So to me, when I have students ask me that question, really I'm thinking in my mind, why do you want to go to medical school? And is that actually the right move for you? And to me, I would rather meet with students and have a conversation about why I saw that as my career and why you're interested in that as your career. And is this the right move for you? Because I think there's a lot of great getting even better, and you can find the actual steps on how to apply online. So I think I would rather have personally a conversation with trainees about what they're passionate about, and then see whether that is the right move for them. I mean, my mother's a pharmacist, my sister's a nurse, my father's an engineer, so the engineering is in there. But I think the reality is a lot of people kind of come to me, and the first thing I ask them is, like, what makes you want to do this? And people are sometimes taken a little bit aback by that. And it's like, well, I want to be able to help steer you, because the reality is that you might be at that point in your career, that point in your trajectory where maybe it's better to do something else first. I mean, I went into medical school quite young, and I have colleagues that, you know, didn't go into it until their mid-20s. And I look at the wealth of knowledge and expertise that they've brought to that career. And so I think maybe I'm a little bit off topic here, but I think, like, for anyone planning on approaching a mentor, whether that's in a clinical field, a non-clinical field, make sure you know yourself and ask yourself, what is my true motivation here? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was a great note to end on. Knowing yourself and your motivation for what you want to do before you approach anyone to ask them about being potentially your mentor is really great advice. So next up, I wanted to steer the conversation into sort of job hunting and successes and failures that may be associated with that. And maybe not just job hunting, but, you know, your career as a whole. How would you define success, especially seeing a lot of people around you? And maybe tell us one example of something that you considered a failure and how you grew from that failure. Because I know I have a lot of failures. So if you don't, I would also like you to tell me how you prevented having any failures throughout your career. So could we start with Dr. Ravi, please?
Sure. I mean, it's an interesting question, because I was thinking about that a little bit, and you know, I don't tend to describe, especially when you're talking about myself. I think of success, I don't see myself as being successful, because that implies an end to the journey, right? Like it implies an end to my growth trajectory, that I can sit back and be like, did I meet my goals or not? And given that I still haven't like come anywhere near where I'd like to be, or where I see my growth and I'm constantly pursuing growth, I don't see success there. What you can evaluate in terms of success is in terms of, you know, project-based successes or milestones. Like when we first created the first prototype, the device, and used it clinically in the first patient, that was a successful trial. Like that is a success. And from my perspective, and you know, there's always been like obstacles and things that I'd have to overcome, but never have I used the mindset of like a full out failure of any task. It's usually something where it's around a growth opportunity. So I'd never used failure as a lexicon. And believe me, there have been lots of let's say, there's lots of obstacles in my path and a number of things that I've had to overcome. But the idea is if you constantly look at it as an opportunity for growth and something to teach you in that moment, as painful as it might be, and then pivot from there and then grow, I think that's the two kind of main aspects. And there's no magic to it. It's just, again, perseverance really at the end of the day. And it's a skill that I am constantly working on. It's not something that I would say I've refined over the years, but it is absolutely something where you just need to have faith that whatever happens, for better or worse, like you benefit from it. You're growing as an individual from all of your experiences. And much like Dr. Newell said, there's nothing in my past that I regret, and everything from my past informs my future, right? So it's just that concept, which is very, very useful. And that's how I kind of phrase it. So in terms of success and failure, really, I designed those for like a project, or I ascribe that to a trial or an experiment. But to describe my career with those words, I think I wouldn't necessarily use that language.
Awesome, I love that. Dr. Shakiba?
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. Thinking back, I think I would group my definitions of success into kind of like two flavors. One is kind of high level. To be honest, I do what I do because it's fun. And if I feel like if I wake up one day and I'm not having fun with the science I'm doing, with the people I'm working with in the environment I'm in, I've failed. That's a failure to me. So that's how I gauge my day-to-day success. When I wake up, not every day is a woo, let's go day. Some days like really need coffee. They really need, I need to take time off and read this book and forget about what I'm doing. But on the average, if I wake up and I'm motivated to do what I do, I think that's a success. And on the other hand, I guess, like Dr. Ravi said, I don't have moments where I think to myself like, wow, that was a grand failure. There's definitely, my road was like a roller coaster. I didn't, think I would end up in academia. Like not every day I woke up and I said like, I definitely need to be a professor. And I think I did like steer off a path of like knowing what I want, especially towards the end of my PhD. And I think that was like my failure, right? It was a lot of like self-reflecting and not having done that. It was as if I was postponing the reflection and deciding what I find fun, what I enjoy doing, what I find rewarding. And I left it for so long that at the end of my PhD, I was scrambling, right? I was like really bet hedging, opening as many doors as I could, and then just like delaying the decision as much as I could. And I guess that was a bit of a failure. Like I probably could have optimized that process better, learned from others, people's approaches better. And I let the anxiety of the decision get to me. But it was a growing experience, right? And I don't regret where I ended up. Maybe I would have had more fun in other routes, but I don't think there's kind of like one true best way to be successful. So
I love that. Thank you for that. And really that theme of the mindset is really, really important, right? So just that growth mindset of, this didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but what can I learn from it? And how can I grow from it and change what I need to change if that's the way that I'm going with this? So that's really great. So next I wanted to kind of switch this question up a little bit and address it to Dr. Gange. So you do see a lot of people in your field as well. And I know some of the students feel like they do have failures and feel like they can't come with those failures or need to remove them from their CVs or their resumes when they're applying to big companies such as Stem Cell. So how can they leverage their failures to be successful when doing that and applying for opportunities?
This is actually a great question because honestly, the job of the recruitment team is to notice when there are gaps or notice when things don't quite line up. And, if you're going through, if you've done research and you're like, yeah, everything worked the first time and I just did this, then I'm going to look at you and be like, so did someone else set it up and you were just literally pipetting for them? What did you actually learn from that experience? So in fact, like that is the job of a solid interview process, to tease that out and to figure out what did you learn from stuff not going right. Because You know, I appreciate the fact that some people might have gotten through graduate school and had everything work in the way they hoped it did, and their research questions all got answers, and then you got a beautiful publication. That is not the case for the majority of people. And I think we're even hearing that on the panel, that what you expect or what you think you want to have happen isn't necessarily the best thing for you to grow as a person and to continue working towards goals that you may not even know about yet. And that even when you achieve what you thought was the goal, something else might open up. So when you are applying for jobs, I wouldn't be afraid to talk about, like, all right, this was what I was trying to do. This was the goal of the project. This is what I had to go through to get there, and use those concrete action words. Tell us what you learned about it, and maybe tell us why you approached something in a way that was different than everybody else. You know, even we're here on the panel, you can hear how many people have done cell culture of mammalian cells. So how many people put that on their resume? I might see 100 resumes that will all tell me they have aseptic technique and they've worked with mammalian cells. And of course, everyone's done PCR. You're not going to stand out for that. But if you tell us why you did that and what you learned from it, and especially what you learned about troubleshooting when something didn't go right, or approaching the question in a different way next time, or how, you know, it turns out your question wasn't relevant, so you pivoted, you were resourceful, you used the tools that were available to you. That stands out. And that's what jumps out to us once you talk to us, that you're, again, being honest about it, that you're able to learn and you're able to move forward. Because that's what we need working in a company, because again, things don't always go right the first time. And we're looking for people who get excited about that challenge. I think for me, that was, in retrospect, one of the exciting things about research, that it was never over. You never succeeded. You're like, okay, and the story is complete. It always brought up new questions. And that's how you should look at kind of putting your failures in. I do agree with what we've been saying about they are learning opportunities. And if you frame them that way, you're going to learn a lot more. And that's what's going to make you way more marketable on the job front, instead of trying to just hide it and be like, let's pretend it didn't happen. Let's try and use all these other terms to cover it up.
I absolutely love that response. Thank you so much for that. There's lots to learn from our quote unquote failures. We really can grow from that, and we should really be able to showcase what we were able to learn during those troubleshooting moments, or that aha moment that maybe might be, I'm asking a very wrong question and I need to change it. I don't know. I have not met scientists who have gotten their experiments to work the first time. So great to you if you did. Personally, I don't have that. And when it does, I'm like, yay. So I really love that, and how to leverage those learning moments to elevate your position. So next up, I wanted to ask Dr. Johnson, what is one piece of significant advice that someone has given you, or maybe something that you just learned through your experiences that you wish someone had told you?
Oh, that's a very broad question. I think, just building on the themes of our previous question, one of the things that I actually learned not too long ago was just to reflect on actually failure and success and ask myself, is it just me perceiving this as a failure, or is it actually a failure? And the reality is that the vast majority of the bumps in the road, it's just really me being hard on myself, and me, you know, telling myself, oh, like this should have gone better. Why didn't it work out this way? But if you talk to anybody else, nobody else thinks it's a failure. Like nobody else perceives you as, you know, not doing something correctly. For example, I tell people now how I thought I wanted to go into this totally different field of medicine. I had to take a year off to do something else. And now when I do fellowship applications, people are excited that I have my master's degree. People are excited that, you know, I had this other interest and I've woven it into, you know, my love of my specialty that I'm in. And people have, when you chat with them, everyone's had a year off, or everyone's had a year that they've done something different, or, you know, they've been trying to figure out their life. So I think the biggest lesson that really I taught myself, you know, being one of those A type, like wanting to achieve and succeed at everything, is that, you know, am I really, like, is it just in my head? Is like the eloquent way of, the non-eloquent way, sorry, of saying it. And am I being too hard on myself?
Awesome. Thank you for that. Absolutely love that advice. And so the final question I have for Dr. Newell, and you've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of students, and you know, they all want to stand out. And we've talked a lot about passion, you know, finding your passion, understanding your passion and your motivations. But I feel like there are a lot of students that have no idea what their passion is. You know, they just feel like, okay, I'm in school, I'm either going to be science, arts, whatever, and then I'm going down this path. That's just the way it's supposed to be. And that is how I'm going to try to make my passion fit into the mold. So how do these students actually discover their passion, and how do they sort of put themselves forward so that they stand out when they don't know what their passion is?
That's a really good question. I think the key to finding your passion is exposing yourself to as much as you can. So you take all the courses you can, talk to all the people that you can, and you'll see where your interests start to drive you. I think and you can be passionate about multiple things. So I think that's my problem. I'm passionate about too many things and don't say no enough, and it's part of my job. So it's okay to have multiple ways that you're interested in taking, and so finding that area that really aligns with. I think Nika said it, like what makes you wake up and get excited every day. Mine was a little different. Mine was whether I dreaded Sunday night. And if I was in a position or a job where Sunday night I just dreaded the week, it just wasn't the place for me to be. So I think that's when you start to feel like, in courses, for instance, when you feel like the courses are getting easier, it's because you're getting in an area you're interested in. And so that's probably a feedback too. If you feel your courses are just feeling a little bit easier, you don't mind spending the time on the homework and that course, and you're really starting to gravitate to a place that you're passionate about. I think with undergrads too, you know, I know there's financial considerations for a lot of people, but everybody thinks they need to do the 4-year degree and there's no deviating from that. And to be honest, a lot of my colleagues along the way took extra years. They tried something, it didn't work, they pivoted. And so not a lot of people just, you know, did a 4-year degree straight up and found that worked. So don't be afraid to take an extra 6 months or a year if it really lets you pivot to an area that you're interested in. Don't be afraid to take the grad school if it lets you develop some skills. That extra year or two in the grand scheme of your career can be very valuable. So I think that flexibility is key to finding your passion and not feeling like just because you've invested something into your history that you have to stay on that path. You can cut your losses and pivot if you need to. And so one of my really closest friends did mechanical engineering with me. Then she went to law school, and then she went to med school, and now she's a radiologist, and she's super happy. A long path, but she had the guts to try all those things on, and she just loves her job now. So you don't always have to do what you started with, and you can make those pivots. And you just got to find what gets you excited in the morning. I think that's the key.
I love that. Thank you for that answer. It just reminds us to truly explore, right? We really need to explore the different avenues that are available to us. Dr. Shakiba, you talked about being lucky and having these people that wanted to do. I don't believe in luck. Like, you were prepared with the opportunity that you were faced with. Someone else could have been in that exact same situation, and if they didn't have that level of readiness to deal with the situation, would not have gone down that path. So really, as trainees, we need to be seeking those opportunities to give us different perspectives, so that when we get that opportunity that we call luck, or someone else looking sees as, oh, you were just lucky, it's no, I was prepared for many things and I just happened to be prepared for this one thing at that right time. So yeah, I love this. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. This has been a wonderful and engaging conversation. I have learned so much and I'm going to be listening to the recordings for like every month just to look for those lessons when I forget the things that I know I should be doing but don't do. I hope the trainees also enjoyed the conversations that we had. Next up, we're going to move into the networking portion of this career panel where we will be going into breakout rooms, and I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie.